So today we have a very distinguished panel with us. Allow me to invite them to the podium. First, Ms. Courtney Finger, Editor-in-Chief, Investment Monitor. She's known in the investment field by all of us. And then Ms. Amba Ruiz, General Director of the Free Zone Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Panama. Welcome on board. And Mr. John Tanui, CEO, Konza Technologies Development Authority, Kenya, and the President of the International Association of Science Parks and Innovation Areas, the African chapter. And then we have Mr. Ansley Brown, Senior Director, Regulations, Policy, Monitoring and Enforcement, Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority. And then Mr. Moham Guruswamy, Chief Knowledge Officer, World Free Zone Organization. Now, welcome to the stage. It's a great pleasure to have you. Now, I will give the panelists, each of them, 5 to 7 minutes as opening remarks, and I will get back to them with the questions. I'll start with Courtney Finger. Please give us your perspective, particularly as you have been dealing with both the investors and with the investment promotion agencies extensively. You have a global perspective. Please kindly highlight the key emerging challenges, opportunities, and then how to deal with them.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, James, for the opportunity to join the panel and to the organizers for having us here. Well, you saw James's kind of depressing slides and charts, so probably everybody needs a drink, even though it's still the morning. What that means is, we were all geared up and kind of excited for the big FDI recovery after the really challenging few years, and it's kind of ground to a halt, and now we have to rethink, I guess, where the market is going, and that means that obviously those of you who are charged with attracting FDI will need to rethink your strategies, and it means things are not going to get easier already. Investment promotion, I don't have to tell any of you, is already a difficult game, and it's not getting any easier. Now, what it means is, of course, when you see these downward-facing lines on charts of global FDI flows, it means, of course, that companies are very cautious. It means they are, of course, struggling themselves, and there may be liquidity problems, but it also means they are viewing the world and the global economy with a high degree of caution, and therefore holding back on investment projects. Now, we know that companies are in an area of risk aversion and caution because we can see it in the numbers, but we also know that in terms of what companies are talking about, what they're saying, and what they're thinking. And we can look to a few things. So in our organization, we do studies on, for example, earnings calls, and look at the transcripts and see what words are coming up, what's resonating. And unfortunately, the words, when you'll do those word maps where you see what words are popping out, and they're all really quite ugly words. So the words in the most recent quarter that are looming largest are supply chains, and not in a good way, shortages, inflation, war. Now, James mentioned already about global value chains, and I know that's a topic that will be delved into with a lot more detail in upcoming sessions, including tomorrow. James is really the world expert on the global value chains, but safe to say they are it's like a puzzle where the pieces have all been pulled up and shaken around, and we're trying to put them all back together, and we don't really know where the pieces fit together. Now, what happened with COVID is, of course, that a lot of trends that were already happening didn't come out of nowhere. They were merely accelerated, and that relates to supply chains. So there's already movements towards regionalization at expense of widespread globalization, consolidating, reordering of corporate footprints, a shortening of supply chains, but all that ramped up heavily with COVID. What it means is that the global value chains that will exist not only now, but 2 years from now, 5 years from now, will look completely different than they did maybe only last year. The challenge for special economic zones and investment promoters in general is finding your place in these new global value chains, so finding where your particular puzzle piece fits into this map. It's not easy because the map is still changing. It hasn't really reordered. But what you can do is study the trends and really try to understand where things are moving, where trade flows happening. Look at FDI patterns and see where companies are setting up what type of operations. But also get into the minds of the companies. And again, if you read their reports and track their sentiments and monitor corporate sentiment, you will understand what their challenges are, and they are the ones that I just mentioned, because it's obviously essential to kind of feel the pain of the companies and investors that you are trying to engage. So to understand what their big challenges are, to understand then how can you offer a remedy to that challenge? Where do you fit into all of this? So again, you have to think in terms of what will be the impact of inflation on FDI? How does it change corporate behavior? How does it change how they view the world? So therefore, what can you offer to alleviate some of the pain of inflationary pressure? Not really, there's no easy answer to that, but you have to be thinking in this way. Again, where can you fit into these shortened supply chains? Maybe regionalization can work in your favor depending on where you are. Nearshoring is a very clear trend. Of course, it depends where, shoring near to where, so you have to figure out where in that nearshoring you can be, but these are clear opportunities for investment promotion agencies. There's some more positive words that we're seeing pop up in terms of corporate sentiment and what companies are talking about, words that are appearing in all their company reports and their earnings calls, and that's ESG, sustainability, SDGs, and diversity and inclusion, for example. We're seeing increasing mentions of these factors in corporate reports, and so it's going a little bit beyond the press release stage now, where companies are really thinking very carefully about their environmental, social, and governance strategies. And I know more and more investment promotion agencies are thinking this way as well, but if it's top of mind and it's now a boardroom agenda, then you have to be prepared to talk that language and maybe help companies explain how locating in your zone or in your jurisdiction or your country fits within their ESG strategy, but also how their investment in particular can help with the achievement of SDGs and help with the developmental goals of the economies that you are charged with assisting in terms of bringing in investment. Because there is room here for some matching. There's still a lot of mismatch that exists between investor needs and goals and the developmental goals of the economies in which they invest, but we have to find where those matches are, because there's huge interest from companies in doing that. Again, what we're finding in terms of corporate sentiment is specific references to SDGs, and individual SDGs is growing in terms of the number of times this is appearing in corporate announcements and reports. So that means you have an opportunity to not only talk that language, but find ways to make that work. Now, of course, related to ESG, or the E part, is carbon neutrality and the race to net zero. Companies are obviously motivated, but also under pressure to move towards carbon neutrality. So you have to think about how your offer can assist with those challenges as well. And that means in terms of their supplies of energy and your own energy transition policies at the national and local level. So I think where I'm going with all of this is the first step is to understand what's driving the companies. What do they care about? What are their challenges? What's holding them back from making investments, to taking those steps and proving that you can be the partner and that you can offer solutions to these challenges. And that first comes from understanding those challenges. So I think I'll stop there. There's probably more that we could elaborate on, but I'll give the floor so we have more time for others.
Thank you, Courtney. Looking at the clock, it takes at the right moment.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
0-0 then.
Exactly. Now, Courtney, you have given a good. Thank you, Courtney. You have the right on time and they give a global perspective, particularly the business perspective, and end up with a very positive note on sustainability investment. Now, may I invite Ms. Amber Ruin, your perspective from the government's perspective, what that government can do at this new era of global economy to meet the challenges and to seize the opportunities. Amber, please.
Bueno, primero que todo quisiera celebrar la Alianza Global de Zonas Económicas Especiales. Para mí manda un mensaje de reconocimiento hacia el poder y la fuerza, el potencial que tienen las zonas económicas especiales para lograr el desarrollo equitativo de las regiones. En este sentido, como representante del gobierno de Panamá, mi primer punto sería identificar lo que a mí me evoca la palabra alianza. Alianza para mí tiene que ver con construir puentes, con construir espacios de convergencias de ideas. Y en este sentido, creo que Panamá, que lleva una tradición de ser un país de servicios durante más de 100 años, creo que no es casualidad que estemos hoy en esta primera conferencia anual de este pacto global. En este sentido, debemos trazarnos objetivos comunes como estados y como también como empresas privadas, pero además de eso, invitar a esta discusión tanto a las universidades como a los gremios. Todos tenemos cosas que aportar. En este sentido también creo que es importante destacar lo que sucedió hace unos días en la cumbre de las Américas, en la cual se hizo una propuesta para crear la Asociación de las Américas para la Prosperidad Económica. Y yo pienso que no es casualidad, pienso que nos estamos enfocando todos hacia un objetivo común, pero lo que nos hace falta es tener un ente que integre todas estas buenas iniciativas. En este sentido, pienso que el GASEZ necesita trascender de ser meramente una declaración de buenas intenciones, hacer ese sistema que conecte las virtudes que tienen los diferentes países de las regiones y en este sentido sumar los esfuerzos, sumar las virtudes de lo que ya está hecho e integrarlo, porque tenemos muchas cosas buenas pasando alrededor, pero nos falta ese punto de integración. Entonces necesitamos que ese punto converja desde un punto de neutralidad. Y creo que en este sentido, pues el hecho de que las Naciones Unidas se haya abocado a hacer este pacto global, pues nos da esperanza de que puede darse ese sistema de comunicación entre los países. También creo que es importante mencionar el hecho de que es hora también de que nos demos cuenta de lo que está pasando a nuestro alrededor. Las empresas que más están creciendo, las que están creando mayor disrupción en el mercado, son aquellas que están creciendo de abajo hacia arriba y del centro hacia afuera. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Necesitamos colocar a las personas en el centro del desarrollo. No se puede hablar de desarrollo, no se puede hablar de alianza global si dejamos atrás a alguien. Y este alguien no tiene por qué ser solamente una mujer, que también, no tiene por qué ser solamente una persona con discapacidad, sino que también puede ser una región, un país y puede ser un sistema económico especial como son las zonas francas. Entonces, creo que es importante partir por allí y tratar de fortalecernos a nosotros como régimen económico especial. Y esto tiene mucho que ver con lo que se estaba discutiendo anteriormente sobre el impuesto anual global. Creo que en este sentido tenemos que, seguir la senda de las conversaciones que se están dando a nivel internacional, tratando de buscar una equidad, pero tener claro que no es lo mismo equidad que igualdad. Equidad es lo que
equity is
necesitamos
not
para que estemos
equal
todos
to
al mismo nivel. Si
equality.
necesitamos o si queremos que todos estemos al mismo nivel,
If we want that
entonces
everyone is at the
ese
same
impuesto
level,
global tendrá que reinvertirse en aquellos más vulnerables.
the
¿Quiénes son?
global
Las
taxes
pymes,
have to
que
be
precisamente son las que
reinvested.
ocupan la mayor parte de los espacios en las zonas económicas especiales. Entonces yo haría una propuesta
I will make a
de
proposal.
que si va adelante esta idea del
If we are
impuesto
going to
global,
go forward with
se
this
reinvierta
idea
dentro
of
de las
global
pymes para que
taxes,
las zonas económicas especiales sigan siendo una incubadora de crecimiento de las
so that the
empresas,
special economic
sigan
zones
siendo
continue to be
ejemplo de resiliencia, sigan siendo ecosistemas que promuevan las energías limpias, sigan siendo
incubator of
aquellas que
global
han demostrado
growth.
tener las cadenas de suministros más resistentes y más resilientes, y que también vayamos más allá y busquemos también crear un plan
We
que
have to try to
movilice
find
las
and to
inversiones.
mobilize
Necesitamos
the
tener un plan B
investments.
y
We have to have a plan
como
B.
región veo que a
As a
veces entre los
region,
países nos vemos como competencia y no como una opción complementaria o alternativa. Y eso,
We cannot see each
siendo
other as
nacional del país que conecta a 1920 puertos alrededor del mundo y que tiene 180 rutas marítimas y que lo prefieren 170 países porque tiene mejor conectividad. A veces sentimos que dejamos a Panamá como hacia un lado
We think
por
at
listas
times that Panama is
peyorativas,
left to one
cuando
side
podríamos servirnos de esta
when we
plataforma en la que
could-
hemos trabajado con amor y con patriotismo desde hace
when we
más de
could
100
work
años.
with
Entonces, el mensaje como
love
gobierno es
and
decir,
compassion.
creemos
We
un
will
objetivo
create
común,
a common
tracémonos
objective.
acciones concretas
We
que se
will bring
traduzcan en
concrete
acciones
actions
eficaces en
that
beneficio
will
de la región
translate
y que
into
esta alianza
effective
global
actions that
defienda
this global
precisamente
alliance
a aquellos en favor de los que nos debemos, que son aquellos que el presidente de mi país le
The
llama la
president of
sexta frontera, que es la que divide
my
de manera
país, of my
injusta a los
country,
ciudadanos al
on the
servicio de los
sixth
cuales estamos.
front.
Si nada de lo que hacemos, estas buenas
Nothing that we
intenciones,
do
no se traducen en la mejoría de la calidad de vida
is
de
without good
nuestra
intention-
gente,
without
en la
good
mejoría
intentions
de
towards
la
our people
capacitación
and
de
the
nuestra mano de obra,
improvement of
entonces
our
yo creo
people.
que hemos fracasado. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Message is quite clear. I will get back to the message later. May I now invite Mr. John Tanui, the CEO from Kenya, to give your perspective, the Africa perspective, and also the Science Parks Innovation Hubs perspective. John,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. First, I want to say it's a special moment for us to be in Jamaica. We've really felt at home, and it's a great experience. And also for the establishment of this special alliance, the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones. I'm here representing ISP. ISP is the International Association of Science Parks and Places of Innovation. And it's in over 75 countries with over 300 members, one of which is where I come from, that's Konsa Technopolis in Kenya. And we have 7 divisions. Africa division is the division that I lead.
Check.
From the discussions that have been done here and the presentation by Mr. Khan, it's good to see the good and also what you mentioned as the bad in terms of the environment that's affecting the special economic zones across the world. And from these great strides that have been seen, at least there's some recovery that's taking place across the world. But however, there are areas of concerns that I think we should be addressing or looking at from special economic zones. Konsa Technopolis, where I lead a team, is both a special economic zones area. We are also a science and technology park, and we are also a smart city. We are also a greenfield. So we are a combination of so many facets, and this gives us a reflection of implications of these global scenarios. One aspect that comes out clearly for SEZs is how do we align our calls in our specific SEZs to the national calls of our countries or our regions, and also the global objectives and directions, including the SDGs. SEZs traditionally are focused in attracting FDIs, promoting exports, and earning foreign exchange for our countries. But this is not enough, as size zones are expected to deliver more, as one of our panelists here has mentioned, drivers of innovation, additionally exports, knowledge growth, and even what we call technological spillovers. They should have more linkages also with the local economy and also be multifunctional and less reliant on the traditional incentives, as this seems to be changing. There is also the global trends that we need to meet obligations, green aspects, commitment to climate change, and many others. So we need to realign in our SECs and move beyond the traditional positioning of SEZs. Secondly, there are many emerging aspects globally, and we've seen also science and technology parks and areas of innovation being possible to play a key role in our special economic zones. At ISP, even there was thinking of special innovation areas as probably one of ways to work closely with SEZs to bring new perspective. There's been mentioned by a panelist here of linkages with the universities, and we think this is the way to go also for SEZs to consider what we call the quadruple helix. How do we bring all these stakeholders so that we turn the special economic zones to focus in the future? Many services and products of special economic zones are moving from traditional viewpoint towards high-value products. There is digital infrastructure that is coming, new technologies. How do we take advantage of this? How do we move towards a better, efficient, greener, smart environment for our SEZs? How do we enhance our linkages in our economies, bringing in the SMEs, not only the multinationals, but linkage, and take advantage of new technologies, smart cities, and working together with the others. During the COVID period, a lot of global chains were really shaken. And this is also an area, how do we foster new industrial chains, cross-border logistics, and looking at how to work together. And lastly, how do we really measure the performance in our SEZs really globally and be able to set directions for the future? So I think the linkage between science technology parks, special economic zones, triple helix to bring the academia will be a way forward to bring vitality to the SEZs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. That's very interesting. I'll pick up the ideas later. May I now give the floor to Hansley Brown, your perspective, the Jamaican perspective, the SEZ perspective. Thank
you. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much. I think based on what we've heard this morning about the 3 mega trends of sustainability, the fourth industrial revolution, and the shifts in the global economic governance highlighted by the inclusive framework from the OECD, I think it's safe to say that zones are now in an era of the great adjustment. And we have to adjust based on those things. Now, honing in on the OECD, the inclusive framework, just for a second, the taxes have to be adjusted as you presented, James, but one of the areas that we're not focused on, and we need to focus a little bit more on, and I guess I'm showing my bias, is monitoring and evaluation. Because many of the areas that are called for within the inclusive framework require those things. You have to show substance, you have to show the nexus between your profits and where it's made. And the only way you can show that is if there are robust monitoring and evaluation systems in place. UNCTAD, in its investment report in 2019, where it focused on special economic zones, clearly outlined that that was an area that was lacking in many special economic zones. And where they did exist, there were gaps. And right now, I would say that we have to fill those gaps. Now, from a business perspective, that might sound like an additional regulatory burden, and in some ways it is. We have to call it what it is. However, in terms of responding to the needs of those investors, the data that's collected will become vitally important in many, many ways, as well as the needs or the requirements within the inclusive framework and even within sustainability. How do you know that you are actually fulfilling SDGs? The latest UNCTAD investment report speaks about ESG standards and how quickly those have proliferated within the last 5 years or so, some of which have now become mandatory. Those didn't exist before. Zones, while this doesn't apply specific to zones, zones being the tip of the spear in many, for many countries in terms of FDI attraction, zones will have to respond and have to adjust to those things. So it represents an opportunity. We have to adjust. I know, for example, in Jamaica, we have work from home, and we have to adjust, we have to adapt. Many of our zones are BPO, and during the pandemic, we put in measures to control the health risks, and that entailed allowing equipment and personnel to work from home outside of the zone. And you know, the pandemic is still with us, but it's not as it was before. However, the world has completely shifted. So because it's shifted, we have to adjust. How we do that, that's an open question, and we're working towards that. But again, this is the era of the great adjustment, to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Hensley. Now it's turn to Mohan. You are the Chief Knowledge Officer, and guru is the word embedded as in your name, so I have to call you the guru. Because of that, I just wish to give you a little bit of hard time. I think early on, Courtney mentioned this kind of the point of diversion between the investors and special economic zones, IPAs, that is investment in sustainable investment. And how can the two sizes working together in this respect? So that's the question for you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Let me start by saying, thanking you for that excellent, impactful presentation on World Investment Report. I must say here that the report and the findings are not only useful for practitioners, but also for academics. I mean, apart from being Chief Knowledge Officer and part of the Knowledge Committee of World Free Zone, I wear an academic hat, wherein I teach strategy and governance in an Australian university. So as part of our global strategy subject, I actually have been giving your World Investment Report as an assignment to my students. We actually make groups, and each group is allocated a region. So we have developed economy, developing Africa, developing Asia, developing Latin America and Caribbean, transitional economy, developed, and then of course underdeveloped, which has landlocked countries, small island countries, and least developed. So I want to actually thank that it's been useful, and I've been using it both from academic and practitioner perspective. Now coming to the question and the focus of key emerging issues, which is the focus of our discussion, I would say overall, to begin with, the emerging issues can be divided into two as macro level issues and more domain specific or free zone specific issues. I think since morning we have heard a lot on all the macro level issues. Take, for example, the geopolitical instability, the pandemic, sanctions, shipping dislocations, and so on. Let me try and focus on free zone specific, domain specific emerging issues. Now, some of these issues have a short-term impact, and some of them will have long-term impact. You know, the changes that have occurred, some may vanish, but some may stay with us. I want to take all of you back 5 years ago. Dr. Samir and myself, we started an initiative. We called it Next Practices Beyond Best Practices. What is in store for us in future? How do we proactively plan and prepare ourselves? Yeah. This was, in a way, addressing what are the future emerging issues and how can free zones plan and prepare themselves. Based on this research paper that we published, we came up with a framework which we call Free Zone of the Future. And this framework has three main pillars. One is sustainability. Under sustainability, we talk about green zones. How can zones become eco-friendly and green? So we have actually developed a certification program for free zones to adopt. And it's a progressive certification wherein you could get out of a 100-point scale, 30, you get bronze, 50, silver, and so on. The second area is being socially responsible. And we realize that social responsibility is not only towards society and community, but companies have an internal social responsibility. Do you have the right kind of policies? Do you have right kind of systems and procedures? Is there inclusivity? Is there discrimination? And all these, in a way, cover sustainable development goals, some area or the other. Yeah? So we used the ILO's decent work agenda as a principle and developed something called Good Place to Work, which is one of the elements under sustainability. We have a tech-ready zone which talks about how can you get smart, because digitalization is the way forward. It's going to be a big game changer. So in order to face the future changes, how quickly and efficiently are you able to digitalize yourself? Then we have another pillar, another element within a pillar, which is safe zone. You know, we talked about the Deputy Director General of World Customs talked about regulatory bodies. Primarily, their job is to protect society and economy. But it has to be done within a development perspective. So we have developed a safe zone certification, which is built on authorized economic operator principles of world customs. So this is another way forward which will help us. And we also are in the process of developing a free zone MBA program from the point of view of doing capability building in future. You know, we need to upskill and reskill ourselves to face these emerging issues which we have been talking about. So we have to prepare our people to go in the race. So we are working on developing a program which will help the CEOs and the senior management of free zones to develop their skills and capabilities. The other pillar is on innovation. How do we come up with innovative incentives to attract investments? You know, the traditional incentives are partial or total exemption from taxation. You know, you give loans, you give space, one-stop shop. But I think one has to think out of the box and look at what kind of new, novel ideas one could come up with to attract investments. Now, majority of the free zones in the world, 70 to 80% are SMEs. You have about 15, 20% large corporations. So how do we go about doing SME development? How do we make what's popularly nowadays called intrapreneurship? How do you develop the entrepreneurial skills within your employees? Yeah. And of course, we strongly encourage and propagate building incubation centers, which does hand-holding for new investors who feel more comfortable. And therefore, it becomes a win-win situation for free zones as well as the investors. So we have actually developed a comprehensive approach to facing the future and overcoming the negativities and looking at it positively, converting these adversities into opportunities. If we use this framework and get ourselves certified, we will be in a better position. Finally, I want to share a thought which actually is triggered from James Hand's presentation. I think we need a three-pronged approach for facing the future. One, businesses need to do strategic reorientation of what are the issues and how to face. Two, I think regulatory bodies need to reformulate policies to support development rather than looking only at compliance, and if you don't comply, you get punished. Instead, how can we shift this to a developmental mode? And thirdly, as one of our fellow speakers mentioned, I think educational institutions need to repackage their value propositions. They need to build curriculum subjects which prepares people to real-life world rather than academic routine degrees. So I guess if we have this three-pronged approach, we will be in a position to manage the emerging issues more effectively. Free zones alone cannot, on their own, go solo and achieve. We need support of governments and regulatory bodies. We need the educational institutions to prepare capabilities which will support us here. So the strong recommendation is to have this three-pronged approach. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Mohan. I think we started late, so I'll just try to have a few more minutes to end this session. It's very exciting. There's still quite a few ideas that are flagged by the panelists that we could probe a bit further. I think that through this discussion, basically the theme is that sustainable investment and how we can do that. It starts with macro to regulatory issues relate to the specific framework as Mohan presented, how to do that, and also that mentioned by Ansley that we need a sound assessment and monitoring system for that. Now let me just try to pick up some of the ideas. I think Ambra mentioned that in the context of the tax reforms, developing countries in the zone will top up the tax. In the meantime, reinvest the tax to the companies, to the investment climate. That is an important principle in coping with the challenges of the global tax reforms while mobilizing resources. I think that's very interesting. Then the question is to Courtney, and what could be the reaction of the investors, and what type of reinvestment from the tax revenues to the zones or to the investment that investors may be particularly interested in?
Well, I agree. It's an interesting and I think quite a productive concept. I mean, some investors will like it, others won't. But I think if they were to reinvest it productively, it would be in skills, I would think, and put it in the skills and training, in particular in technical skills that are in the biggest demand. But the important part would be having the conversation with the investor community to make sure where would be the most productive place to put such reinvestment, and where are, again, the mismatches in, for example, the skills that they need for the future and what's on offer.
Thanks. Yes, very brief. That's what we need now, and precise. Now, John, you made a very interesting proposal, a possible initiative, saying that for special economic zones, perhaps they should consider an area in the zone that deals with innovation to strengthen the zones. So that's kind of collaboration between science parks, innovation hubs on the one side, and the normal special economic zones on the other, if I understand you correctly. Now, the reaction I would like to ask is first, Amber, what do you think about that and how we can do that? Create synergies between science parks and special economic zones, creating special area for that. And I would also like Anthony also follow up on that question to pick up what John has proposed. Please, Amber.
Bueno, lo primero creo que
Okay,
es
the
observar
first, I believe
cómo,
that
por ejemplo,
we need to
bueno, no
observe
quiero mencionar muchas marcas, pero creo que es como mejor me puedo explicar.
the best way I can.
Como por ejemplo
Explain.
Airbnb, sin tener
Like
ningún hotel,
Airbnbs,
se ha posicionado
unlike
tanto en la
hotel.
industria del turismo, como Alibaba, sin tener ninguna
Alibaba,
tienda, también ha
without
superado
having
grandes empresas
a
como
shop,
puede ser, bueno, empresas tradicionales.
be an
Y
example.
como también
And also,
Uber, también sin
Uber,
tener
without
ninguna agencia de
having
transporte,
a
como ha
travel
podido
agency,
disrumpir en el mercado.
how
Entonces,
it
todo lo que
has
quiero
been
decir
able to
con esto,
disrupt the
con
market.
estos ejemplos,
With these
es el hecho
examples,
de que la
is the fact
innovación
that
y el darle
innovation,
espacio a las personas para que puedan desarrollar sus ideas, creo que es la mejor estrategia para
when we
precisamente
develop the
crear
ideas of
esos
others, is
ecosistemas
exactly what
que
we need,
promuevan
and it
innovación,
creates
transferencia de
ecosystems
conocimientos y el empoderamiento también de
knowledge
las personas vulnerables.
and assist of vulnerable persons.
Thank you very much. Now, Ansley also pick up what John's proposal, and that's from the Science Park Innovation Hubs community.
Yes, I think that in terms of science and technology, that's a critical area. It's part of the other mega trend, which is the fourth industrial revolution. Zones, one of the policy objectives of zones is to test out new policies within areas or within countries before you roll it out. So if you want to attract and incentivize innovation, it's natural that you would create an area that would do that very same thing. And oftentimes, when we look at things from the developing world, we try to adopt or bring in outside technology, and that's great. Sometimes we need to start to look at our own domestic technologies and solving our own problems, because there are millions of people that could do with those solutions, and we could develop that and export it out to the rest of the developing world.
Thanks, Ansley. John, Mohan presented a package of the sustainability zones, or they called modern zones, with a number of elements: social responsibility, green, safe zones, innovation, SMEs. What's your reaction from the science park and innovation hubs they also fall into the kind of categories that you are looking into in the new generation of science parks, innovation hubs?
Thank you. I agree. Talk about really facing the future and the strategies that we need to take in facing the future. And it's going about importance of SEZs. If you look, the main is how do we attract investment to our SEZs? And he talked also about traditional incentives not really going to be competitive in the future, which means we need to look at what are we going to offer this investor coming to our SEZs. And innovation hubs would be a value because enterprises and corporations coming to our SEZs needs to face the future strongly to be sure they are ready to compete, and they need to be having ability to scan what's in the market, what's the challenges in their products, and an innovation space within an SEZ will strongly play this role. The other challenge is at times now the products and services are becoming maybe high-tech products and services, and you probably need high-skill capabilities within your SEZs and not the traditional one scope or push from one test to another product. And this is where you need linkage with academia and putting even research centers within the special economic zones. And just taking the example of Concert Technopolis, because we just started in Kenya this, and we are facing a huge challenge. How do we put ourselves in a competitive position to attract investment to Kenya and to the region or to Africa? And so we look at ensuring that the location is a special economic zones with the traditional incentives and additional incentives. We made it a science and technology park and ensure we have programs that works with industry so that this can be attractive, and we establish a new institution, an academia, an advanced institute of science and technology to help us navigate that. So I think this is the way to go, and the ISP is a great partner, and we are honored as ISP to be really founding members of the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, and I think it presents a greater future and a better position to create resilience, sustainability, and prosperity for us.
I think Samir is reminding us of the time. I still want to have this 10 minutes because we were late for that. Before I ask Mohan briefly answer a question, I just wish to alert the panelists. I will call upon you each to give just one sentence as a takeaway message to the audience to end our session. So think about that while Mohan is answering the question. Mohan, my question is quite clear. You mentioned all the criteria you want to have set the kind of standards on SEZ, the modern ones. And you mentioned that certification. Now, my question is that if the Free Zone Organization, World Free Zone Organization is going to set standards, who is going to issue the certificate? Meaning the certification process is normally separate from the standard setters. So what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, a very valid question. Agree with you. It's like the person who is going to appear for an exam should not set one's own paper. So probably we need to involve domain experts from across the globe, established agencies who get to know the criteria that we have set. Just to give a quick brief, for example, in green certification, we have 7 criteria like green operations, green transportation, green construction, water, electricity consumption. So the tool that has been developed is scientific and it's easily understandable and applicable. So it's good to involve a third party in doing the evaluation. Even though we start with self-evaluation, then free zones could submit it, but later on we could involve a third party. The whole idea is, I mean, the concept is that there has to be informed decisions that are primarily data-driven, which should be given attention. How can we build, through research, commercial intelligence within the organization, as well as how could we achieve some of these certifications by digging deeper within the organization. We also want companies or free zones to take responsibility and do it. The certification is not, of course, like a formal awarded degree. It's more like helping oneself to improvise. But I think involving third parties would add a lot of value.
Thank you, Moham. Now, the final words. We do not have the opportunity for interaction with the floor. I wish to leave that to the further discussion in the afternoon when we have our colleagues moderating the sessions. Now, one sentence as a message, takeaway message to the audience. We start with Courtney.
Okay, thank you. Well, I liked Ainsley's phrase of the great readjustment. It's clear that we're in a time of enormous flux in the macro, but also in the micro, as Dr. Mohan mentioned. And so that can be scary and unnerving, but there is a great opportunity for zones, economic development professionals, and investment promotion professionals to actually work hand in hand with the companies, with investors, with the private sector to not only help address the challenges that those companies have themselves, but to address the great global challenges we have. So I would just implore you to find the ways to make the most of those opportunities and to work together to confront these challenges so that we come out the other side of this transition in a better place all around.
It's a very long sentence, Courtney.
But it was just one sentence.
Yeah, I just wish to have
With
one
some
sentence
commas in there and some semicolons. But
for
that's
takeaway people can remember and memorize. Now you, Amber.
Well, the sentence is we have two options: grow up together or disappear separate.
Great. So grow together. Now, John.
Let's face the future, focusing on opportunities and collaboration.
Great. Collaboration and opportunities.
Yes,
Yes.
the readjustment will require partnership. It will require new thinking. And no longer is it about the carrot or the stick. It's about collaboration. We can't punishment or reward. It's about everybody benefiting together.
Thanks. And then Mohan.
Thank you. The famous quotation, I want to end this with, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Great. So I think, just summarizing for what has been said, the message is that working together, focusing on opportunities. So that's the message from this panel, I think. And it's a great discussion. I just wish to inform you that in the afternoon we still have two sessions. One is on SDG model zones, that my colleagues, Paul Westendorf is going to moderate that, and then a session on working together to facilitate investment in the recovery, and my colleague, Stefania Bonilla, is going to moderate that panel. And they will deepen the discussion on sustainable investment in the new era of global economy. Thank you very much. Thank you.